We're going to begin this first panel. We will be studying the referendum, which took place in Sudan. This panel is made up of three people. Jeune, sitting to my left, who will be talking to us about his harsh journey. He has had an unusual past, and he will be telling us about that. We will be hearing from Mr. Bernard Schalscha, who will be speaking to us about the situation in Darfour. He is a French journalist based in Paris. And we have Mr. Juan Branco, who has carried out a number of tasks in the International Criminal Court with Mr. Luis Moreno Branco, and he will be telling us more about legal aspects, in particular concerning the President al-Bashir. So to begin, we will give Mr. John Dow the floor. He will be talking to us about his life. His life represents what a number of people in the south of Sudan have been living through for many years now. Please, John.
I think I have mic.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let me know if you can hear me. Okay, that's better. Well, thank you very much, Christine, for your nice introduction. I appreciate. By the way, this is my first time in Geneva. Yesterday, when I was coming, I was so excited to be here because not only that it's a place where many good things happen, but I heard of the name Geneva when I was 15 years old in Ethiopia and in a refugee camp in Kenya and back in Sudan. The name Geneva, it kept ringing all the time, and now here I am. So I am very glad to be here. First of all, my name is John Dow, one of the Southern Sudanese, which is called the so-called Lost Boys of Sudan. We actually got that name from somebody else. I don't know who actually named us as Lost Boys of Sudan. Today, I'm not a boy. I'm a grown-up person. But the name is still there. But I want to talk to you about why people call us Lost Boys of Sudan. I'm going to tell you by explaining a little bit my life story, how I become where I am today. It happened when I was 12 years old in our country, Sudan. Most of you do not know about Sudan. Sudan has been known by a few things. One, it's the country that has been divided into two by the longest river in the world, River Nile. Number two is the largest country in Africa. Last, which is number three, is the country that have been actually fighting each other for many years. Wars started in the 18th century. Another war in 1955. That war in 1955 ended in 1972. Another war started in 1983 and ended in 2005. Yet another war is going on now in our country. That the one was started in 2003 in the region of Darfour, and it's still going on now. I'm going to talk to you about the war that started in 1983 until 2005. It had actually been the war fought between the North and South. And what happened was that the successive government in the North have been actually trying to kill anybody they can find. And so war broke out between the North and South. There was a rebellion in the South, those who have been trying to resist the mistreatment of the government. And so it happened when I was a little boy. 1983, I was a little boy taking care of my father's cows, no schools, taking care of goats. There were no school in Southern Sudan, especially in the village I was growing up. And then But the war didn't get to my village until I was 12 years old, in 1987. This is when my village was attacked. And my village was attacked when we were sleeping. My brothers and I, we were sleeping in our house. In the middle of the night, we were woken up by a whistling of bullets. The bomb exploded here and there. We woke up. We found ourselves outside. I was hearing my mother calling outside and saying, meet back away. That's a Dinka statement saying, children, come out. As we got outside, I saw somebody running across on my home compound, and I thought it was my father. So in the middle of the night, there's no light. So I was running after him. As we were going through kind of some few feet, he dodged into the grass. And I was coming near him, kind of by him. He grabbed my arm and pulled me into the grass. All of a sudden, a long line of troops were coming shooting. So we kept quiet. They went into the village. We got back to the pass. A guy I thought it was my father was my neighbor. This guy called Abraham Deganiop. I was with this man until the morning. And in the morning, I asked if I could go to see my parents, all of my family members, if they were alive. Well, he said that I should go with them. So we went for about 3 days with nobody. Then later we met with a woman with her 2 daughters. We became 5. Later we were ambushed, and one woman and her 2 daughters were abducted to the north. They were taken as wife or concubines, whatever you may call it. And then Abraham and I, we kept going. We were beaten. At some point, we were beaten to a point that I thought, if you see my body, you could see a lot of scars because of being beaten to a point that I thought I was dead. But that didn't, but I survived. At night, there's nothing to cover yourself. It was very cold. Honestly, I cry at night because it's just cold. Can't take it. Daytime, it was just very difficult. We ran into so many ambushes and being attacked by wild animal, and there was nothing to eat. Honestly, I still remember chewing grass like a cow, eating anything that we could find, wild fruits, so they would stay alive. Later, we came to a place called Pibor, where there was no water. We went for 1 day and a half with no water. Situation became so difficult. And so we others didn't want to go. Others want to die there. And later, we start drinking human urine, so we stay alive. By the time we got to some distance, we found mud. Mud is like mashed potatoes. We ate it. It helped some of the boys, some of us. Remember, when we got into that situation, we were 2 first, and then 5 later. And then we became 19, and then during that time, we were 27. So by the time we left that area where there was no water, we were only 4 of us, and the 23 of us died. And so we moved to Ethiopia. From my village to Ethiopia, it took us 3 months to get there. We got to Ethiopia, and some of the boys and girls were coming because in the north they announced that they have to exterminate or kill anybody who is a young boy so that they cannot grow up to join the Southern Revolution. So we came to Ethiopia, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we accumulated there. We are put in a group of 50. I was taller than the other boys, as I said before, so I was 12 years old, but I was taller than the boys. So I was put in charge of 50. These boys were from age 5 to age 15. My group became 1,200 lost boys. These boys were crying every day. They say they want to drink milk, they want to see their mothers, they want to eat food. There's nothing I can do. Myself and other boys who were older was trying to give them support. Today's bad, tomorrow will be good. And then it was another problem too because of diseases such as cholera, typhoid, measles, chickenpox were killing boys every day. I remember in my own group, 2 or 3 boys dying every day. We took their bodies to where we can bury them so that we can give our brothers dignity. when we come back tomorrow to bury the bodies of some more boys, we could find the bodies of those we buried yesterday eaten by hyenas or other wild animal at night. That was a very graphic part of life story. But we didn't give up. We kept pushing on. Later, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees came to Ethiopia to a place called Peñedo, and then the World Food Program, they came and they started bringing food. We stayed there, and then they start bringing clothes. They give you a blanket. So if you had a blanket, then you cover yourself at night. And then at daytime, you cover yourself with it too, because there were no anybody wearing any clothes, and a piece of clothes. And so it was just good, and our life was getting better. 4 years later, the civil war in Ethiopia forced us to go back to southern Sudan. And the number of the lost boys and girls and adults became 27,000. So we were there moving back to southern Sudan as we are forced to do so. But then we stopped at a place called Gilo. Gilo is a river infested with a lot of crocodiles in it. The government of Ethiopia, which is actually the current government of Ethiopia, sent troops after us and start shooting at us. And some of us killed, others drowned, others eaten by crocodiles, others lost, others captured. We moved back to southern Sudan and stayed there for about 9 months. The Sudan government knew that we were back in Sudan, and so they bomb us twice every day. We dug some trenches so that when they bomb us there, we will be we run into them. And so it was good. And then, some of us were killed. When it became really tough, because they sent Antonov. Antonov is a Russian-made aircraft that we knew the sound. Even right now, I can tell which one is Antonov, which one is what. So we decided to move to the interior part of southern Sudan to a place called Kapoita, and then we were attacked there. In 1992, we eventually made it to another country called Kenya. Now, coming to Kenya was good because this is where I start to learn A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3. I never been to any school of any kind. And I started my education when I was 17 years old. It was just great, sitting under a tree, sitting on the dirt, using my fingers as writing A, B, C, D. It was just unbelievable. The United Nations also, agencies helping us, such as LWF, Lutheran World Federation, that's how it's called, UNHCR, IRC, which is International Rescue Committee, and then so many others, they help us. And then we now adore the United Nations agencies to become like our fathers and mothers, because they were the one supporting us with education, with food, with security. This is where I started my education until 1999, when the American came to Kenya, in Kakuma, refugee Kenya. And it was just great. They were telling us they would take us to America. We didn't believe them. Well, it was a real thing. So in 2000, they came back again and started taking us to America. Well, some of us actually think that they know about America, and the speculation about America, people start talking, especially the lost boys, and they actually been telling us, if you go to America, be very careful. American girls are crazy. They say how crazy they are. They carry small bag, and in those small bag, and my friend asked, "Do you know what is in those small bag?" We say no. Well, they have gun in it. If you mess up with American girls, they will shoot you. You know, I said, this is a country that is very good, and the women are killing people. Anyway, I got my turn. I went to JFK, which is New York, and then later flown to Syracuse, New York, my current home. And then from there, I started working at McDonald's, doing dishes and doing a security guard. And then I transferred I enrolled at Onondaga Community College, finished my associate degree in 2004, and then transferred to Syracuse University, where I finished my bachelor degree. And I was so lucky to be in America. And then I said, well, I am in America. What can I do to my people? And that's why I start to build a hospital in southern Sudan. It has been operating now for 4 years. And I am now trying to see if I can bring agriculture to my people so that I can bring what I got from United States to help my people. Look, I was not finished. Although I have been hunted down by my fellows Sudanese in the north trying to kill me, thank God I am alive, and that there is a reason as to why I am alive. And that is I want help. I want to help my people, not always the West that is supposed to be helping our people. In this situation I am able to help my people, and that's what it's supposed to be. And today, I am glad to be part of these discussions. But there is one thing I want to remind all of you. Sudan problem is not over. It's going on in Darfour. It's still going on in southern Sudan, especially in a place called Abyei. If you could please, as a human rights group, or was supporting this organization, war is not over. But let me tell you this. Without human rights, that would be writing about, human rights group, that would be writing about our situation, none of us would have survived. I would say that. So the great work you start doing, and please still do that work. A BA problem is still there. It's not over. The problem in Southern Sudan is not over. So I want to say that, you may not know who are you helping. If I was not helped by people like you and others, think that I have done would have never been done. And you are there as eyes of us, those who have been suffering. And so many other places as the name of the people are coming from, either China, Libya, now Egypt, and other places that speakers are going to speak. They have the same problem. It's just that they are in different places. It's just that they are not African. But I want to ask you if you could support and make sure the problem of Darfur has come to successful end. And problem in South Sudan is not over. Thank you very much.
Merci. Thank you for your talk. What you said shows us the exceptional life that John has experienced, and it shows us the activities that we undertake and the struggle we take up. All of this is not useless, and we should remember this, bear this in mind, and we must continue to fight to defend human rights throughout the world. And as John has explained so well, his personal history continues. He lost his family. They were separated when they fled at night, but he found them years later. And he brought his mother to the U.S. So there was a happy ending, American style. So that's a beautiful story. And today he is very involved in human rights advocacy. Now let's come back to Sudan today. As you all know, a referendum took place in Sudan. The South voted for independence. There is a province called Abyei, which John referred to, which straddles the north and the south, where there still has not been a clear definition in terms of borders for this state, but it's not clear as to whether this state will belong to the north or the south of Sudan. We should add that this province is extremely wealthy. And you have noted that during the referendum period, we talked about Sudan a great deal, but we haven't spoken a great deal about Darfur. And I think that Schalscha will be speaking to us about Darfur. But I will be giving the floor to Juan Branco, who, as I said, has worked in the International Criminal Court, and it will be interesting to hear the perspective after this referendum and to hear the position of the public prosecutor, bearing in mind the situation of President al-Bashir. First of all, I'd like to thank you. I'd like to present this position in relation to the prosecutor concerning the referendum and the legal process that has been undertaken. Now, concerning the referendum, an analysis of the prosecutor had envisaged a number of scenarios, and what is actually occurring is not what had been foreseen at the outset. At the same time, we have to see to what extent the optimistic scenario that people are expecting will actually take place. One of the leaders of the SPLM seems to have broken with the North and accused the Sudan government of preparing another genocide by July. And we'll have to take this in context, but you can see that the situation is not stabilized. And we have to see what the position of the international community will be and that of the United States. Negotiations have taken place with President al-Bashir, and they seem to be buying peace and immunity on the international scene. And this diplomatic and judiciary effort may lead it to be suspended by the the Security Council. Now, this may pay off in the short term, but medium and long term prospects are not good. And we have to take a look also at Libya. Mr. Gaddafi had benefited from a similar process, re-legitimization by the international community. And then when his power was challenged and the situation became more fragile, our reflexes came back. And there's a caveat here. The legal aspect in terms of peace should be borne in mind. And although events have taken place peacefully so far, this does not guarantee that in the upcoming months this will continue to be the case. I'd like to take advantage of this moment to refer to discuss the revolution in the Arab world. And the court was seized with this, and Libya will be discussed in the upcoming weeks. And there will be an intervention by the prosecutor on this matter. Now, going back to our subject, we should see what the changes of a regime in Libya will have on Sudan. This could be very major and had a direct military economic impact in terms of support and alliances, and within the African Union in terms of supporting President al-Bashir. We know that Sudan was a spearhead, and the International Criminal Court will have to address this. We know the situation is very fragile, and a number of procedures may be blocked temporarily. There were two important elements that should be considered: the accusation of genocide against President al-Bashir by the ICC, and the accusation of genocide for murder and for ongoing genocide. This is very important. We're not talking about a situation here that is over, that has ended, and where we would have moved on to something else, and we're thinking about things, thinking about amnesty or something else. No, the prosecutor agrees on this point, and we see that in the camps, this situation is brewing. There were hundreds of victims and massive rape campaigns. carried out by the armed forces, people in uniform. And we will have to determine who is responsible for this. And it is for the international community to bear this in mind, to address this situation. It has not been taken into account by diplomatic efforts. And there must be a confirmation of the events and to determine whether this was genocide and examine the ongoing genocide that is taking place right now. And the U.S. position is of interest to us. This idea of nevermore, and how will diplomacy change now? So before the referendum, there was an attempt of pacification. And the activities could seem legitimate considering the very violent attacks that were going place. And now we will have to think about the legal process in this context of the international legal system and see how they can intervene and play a role in negotiations. I'd like to recall, considering Banjai Bodo, and the attack of Skanetita, the judges have confirmed the accusations and the charges, and we will see what will happen in the next few months. And the African Union approach, and we will see what is happening in this trial. They are being accused of, the armed forces are being accused of attacks. And we will have to study the legal process that takes place. Arrest warrants have been issued against President al-Bashir, and the prosecutor plans on issuing a new one in 2011 and reserves the right to delve further into this in the next few months. Now, legally speaking, we have finally come to the end of the first stage. What is important is for the international community to react, and civil society in particular. And we must maintain pressure on states. And remember the victims. They are part of this process. And we should move forward in this regard. Well, that was my preliminary presentation. Thank you. Now, you've just brought up the specificity of the Sudanese situation, that this is not over, that this is ongoing and continuing. And now I'm going to give John the floor, who has information coming in from the field, and he can bear witness to what is now taking place there in the south of Sudan. John.
Yeah. Well, I would also attest to that such a situation, especially in Darfur, has been going on. There has been intimidation, threats, and abductions in the camp in Darfur of the people that have been seen by the Sudanese forces as a threat to the government, or those who are telling the truth. So that's what is actually the reality is on the ground that's going on right now. But also I want to mention very quickly that even in the southern Sudan, some of you might have heard that there was a successful referendum. Yes, there was. But the people in the north that have the same tradition that whatever that have been done, they could redo it by instigating or arming other people in the south that can actually destabilize the would-be new country. And that's what has been going on now. Georgia Thor I am myself a Dinka. And Georgia Thor also is a Dinka guy who actually rebel against the South. This is a devolving issue right now in the South. But let me ask you this. Where do you think they get weapons? Where do you think they get all these ammunitions? Where do you think that they get all these communication capability? First of all, they don't have money. Who give them money to get all of this? They are in the middle of somewhere there where they are not even near to any border that you would say, well, they get it from the border, whatever it is. No. It is completely clearly the people in the north are still doing that. And actually, as my brother said before, that has been said, of course, the SPLA, I mean the people in southern Sudan, have a clear indication and evidence that the people in the north are working to topple the government of the south. It is the right time to do that. So it is actually something that each of us here in this room has to pay attention to. And that may lead into genocide. The people in the south are not going to accept that. As the north are actively campaigning and arming southern militias, but that's their style. The proxies is what they have been doing all the time, and that's why you heard about Janjaweed. Janjaweed are the proxies of the north that are raping and killing and maiming anybody in the western part of our country. So that is going on in southern Sudan. And recently there has been also killing in Abyei. More than 200 people died just recently, maybe 2 weeks ago. I came from southern Sudan just 2 weeks ago too. So I have heard, and I have a very strong connection with the government of South, with some people in the government of Southern Sudan that can give me more information while I'm in the United States. So this is what is the reality, as I have to attest. As I said before, it is what is going on in the south right now, as well as in Darfur. The intimidation, killing, abduction, arming of groups to actually bring problems in Southern Sudan. And that's what I've been saying. There may be a genocide if the international community may not take care of this, pay more attention to this. As it is, maybe people think it's still very, very small. But this small thing will grow into a bigger thing later.
Thank you, John. Bernard, we're going to give you the floor now so that you can speak about the situation in Darfur. You're the Secretary General of the Darfour Urgence in France, and you have been defending minorities for many years. You've been defending human rights. Please explain the situation in Darfur. This region was overlooked by the media when they spoke about Darfur and when they talked about the referendum. Yes, thank you. Today in France, when we talk about Darfur, we say, oh, haven't they worked that out? Isn't there peace in Darfur? Haven't they negotiated? That's what people who are well-informed say. So people don't hear about that unless George Clooney will speak about it at a press briefing. When he spoke about it, of course, well, okay, but otherwise people have no idea what it is. It's something very remote, far away. It's in Africa and everybody knows. So they all kill each other. They've been doing it for decades. Well, it's too complicated for us. So you can understand how hard our work is to inform people about Darfur and to explain that the situation has not been resolved. There have been mass murders. There have been murdering committed till 2005-06. And we should realize what is happening in this region, the region making up Darfur in the west of Sudan. It's as big as France. 10 years ago, there were 6 or 7 million inhabitants. It was completely neglected by Central Powers. It's the biggest country in Africa, as John told us. It was, at least, until the South seceded. It's a very centralized country. Khartoum is the capital. And they're an area that was completely overlooked, Darfur. bad infrastructures in schools, and in 2003 rather, there was a rebellion over the country's wealth, and they were demanding that the government look into what was going on there, and the government had avoided their obligations on groups were attacked, and this led to a backlash of repression that was incredible, leading to a crisis. There was a demand for development by two rebel army groups, and the government unleashed incredible violent reaction. Now, why was it so violent? How can we explain this? Well, if we look at recent history of the 20th century, we see that there have been armed rebellions, medium-sized, that have led to disproportionate reactions by the Central Powers. Nothing simple. It's not like in the south of Sudan when they fought the central government. We can say that the central government reacted in quotes normally. They were Christian, but there was a majority of Islamist. So, okay, it was normal. We're going to kill each other. But in Darfur, everybody is Muslim. There was a coup in '89, and these are Muslims who are attacking other Muslims. But let's take a closer look. In Darfur, we have black Africans of different ethnic groups, and notably the Four. That's why we call it Darfour. And these people became a Muslim decades ago, and the government demanded this allegiance. They are the Muslim Brotherhood, and they had a strong hand in certain currents. It was hardcore Islamist policy, and they felt that these black Africans were not very orthodox. And something that is very unusual that we should bear in mind is that the Khartoum government is made up of Arabs. Well, we're Westerners. We have very simple categories. We look at people and we say, are they Arabs, are they black? Different categories. But that's not how we should do it. We are innocent. We look at the faces of the leaders in Khartoum. We look at them and we see that they're black. They're black. But we look at their ancestry. If they had an Arab in their ancestry, they are to be considered as Arabs. So we have tribes and ethnic groups that are supposedly, they're called Arabs. We call them Arabs. And you can't tell by looking at them. So this isn't racism against the blacks based on skin or on their faces or their features. The worst kind of racism is one linked to identity. Perhaps we won't go back into history, but when we look at Darfur, we see that they're being exterminated by Khartoum, and we look at those who are organizing the massacre, that is the Arab government faces. When you look at the faces, and I'm not talking about customs or traditions, but if you look at the face, you can't tell the difference. You have to really be a local resident to look at them and to recognize it, the difference. So in Europe, we've had to describe this situation. There is an Arab Islamist government massacring in Darfur Muslim, black people. And we've had to struggle to explain this. This is how people speak locally. That's how they call each other. They use these terms themselves. Now, if you talk to anybody locally, that's how they talk. An insult if we use these terms. This is how people speak. The massacres that took place were incredibly, incredibly violent. The planes arrived over the villages and they were launching bombs. And the Janjaweed came. When people fled, they killed them. They took young girls and made them sexual slaves. Women were massively raped. And rape as a weapon of war is something that the prosecutor in The Hague knows very well. And this went on for years. Then there was pressure finally put on the issue and it calmed down. But in this violence, we see past history, the history of slavery, organized by Arabs in that region of in Africa. And you see that one of the insults in the area, there's a word that is used which means you're a slave. I forgot the word in Arab all of a sudden, as if we were saying, you idiot. Just a very common word that means, oh, you're just a slave. And that's used all the time. So this is custom. And this is the aftermath of the history of slavery. And this is not only inflicted by Europeans, but we also know that it was internal as well. Now, I don't know if the ICC has dealt with this issue, but there were cases where slaves in Darfour, where the Janjaweed took people instead of killing them, and they brought them to Khartoum and turned them into slaves, as was the case 60 years ago or 100 years ago. So the situation has not been resolved in Darfur. And there are 6 to 7 million people in the country, but there are 3 million who have been displaced. They are not refugees, they are within their own country, but they live in camps or wherever they can find a place to live. They've reorganized their lives thanks to international aid. And the death toll has been stabilized, but it's still a very dangerous area because the situation is completely disorganized. There are gangs and bandits. When women leave the camps, for example, to get water or wood or something, women are attacked and raped, killed. It's very dangerous around the camps. And when the NGOs bring in food, they risk being attacked by Janjaweed or Janjaweed who were not paid. And they become bandits, attacking anyone. But we have 3 million displaced people in camps. Well, now we're saying to each other, oh, the situation is calm in Darfur. Well, it's not really calm. For these people living in the camps, the situation is very hard. It's extremely dangerous around the camps. Regularly there's fighting between the rebels and the army, and more people are displaced, and Juan spoke to us about this before, so the situation has not been resolved. And one reproach that we're making, my group, to the international community, is that when peace was signed in 2002 or 2001 with the South, they should have separated the southern problem from Darfur. And now we have a very strange situation. We have not focused on the situation in Far sufficiently, and there's another problem. We have a terrible situation that I'm going to describe to you now. The ICC has accused the president, that is al-Bashir, of genocide and crimes against humanity. And as there was a referendum, everyone was afraid that al-Bashir would try to sabotage the referendum. The conditions that the referendum took place were not excellent, but it was more or less acceptable. And so that he would not sabotage this, the international community refrained from confronting him. So those around, or in his team, 2 people were accused for crimes against humanity, al-Bushai and al-Dakhum. 2 people. And in 2006, was it? 2007? Yes. These people were never arrested by the local government. You know that people normally, when people are accused, they are arrested, but there nothing was done. One was promoted Minister of Humanitarian Affairs. Now you can see what's going on in the government. But then, even more pathetically speaking, in the discussions about the referendum and implementation of the referendum and monitoring of it in the Bay region, in the buffer region, the international community has asked a responsible person to get involved. And we discovered one day the helicopter under the control of the UN and the African Union is carrying now one of the 2 who were accused of crimes against humanity by the. Normally, when you see somebody who's been accused, should be arrested and brought to the prosecutor. But no, the international community is paying for his transport. So you can see what kind of a paradoxical situation. It's really a dilemma. It's really a quandary for the international community. The situation is very complicated to resolve. And this is something that we should discuss. We, associations that are addressing human rights issue on an international level. And I will conclude by raising another problem where we can see how complicated the situation is. For years, the Khartoum government has been proposing negotiations for the rebels. Now we see that Libya, there were discussions, and you know that Gaddafi and the Sudan have ties that have been going on for years. So there were negotiations that were totally bogus. And in Qatar and Doha, the Khartoum government and Bashir say, we'll negotiate. I'll put my cards on the table. I will engage in negotiations. And 2 rebel groups went to negotiate it, but it didn't work. No, yes, it did. They signed an agreement between the Jeune rebels, who were Islamist, and negotiated with the government. They signed an agreement, and the next day, the government bombed the bastions of the same group called Jeune. So you can see how what the modus operandi of Bashir usually is. So the other rebel group, which is called Southern Liberation Movement and the Southern Liberation Army, Abdel Hadi Madour, refused to negotiate, and the international community attacked it, saying, you have to go negotiate. It's because of you that there's a problem. And Bashir government wants to negotiate it, so go negotiate. We need peace in Darfur. This is the kind of problem we have before us. People say, look, the rebels don't want peace. There cannot be no agreement unless there's an international agreement that the Janjaweed are disarmed, a guarantee that populations, the civil populations, can return to their villages in normally secure conditions. You have to imagine the situation. These villages are scattered and going home when it's dangerous. We have to have a police force there. And if not, there'll be Janjaweed or bandits. There'll be tribes prowling, looting. So if you're not protected by the military or by the international community, you go back to villages that were looted and devastated. Well, how can you go back home? How are you going to live? Economically, you're at the mercy of gangsters who may attack you by Janjaweed or others. So they say, we can't go back home. So the rebels say, we will not sign if the international community doesn't guarantee that people can go back home and live normal lives. So the international community, well, sees the problem that we see. The international community wants peace. They say, we have to have peace. But they have overlooked the reasons that people were living in conditions of extreme. And over the decades, they had managed to have a livable, tenable situation, but then the genocide came, and now, in order to live a normal life with peace, in quotes, we need a guarantee by the international community, and we don't need to have the international community nudging everybody to make peace. So those who defend justice, like us, appear to be warmongers, because we say we can't blame the rebels for not signing, because the reasons that unleashed the aggression have gotten even worse. Thank you for your kind attention. We're going to use the remaining time to respond to questions, and I suppose that all of these presentations will have given you food for thought. Who would like to begin? Sir? Can you introduce yourself, please, and see whom you're addressing your question to? Shall I speak in the microphone? My name is Aaron Remal. I represent the Institute of Judaism in Canada, and I would like to ask Mr. Zhao three questions. The first question, lately we've heard that the new government in the south of Sudan has requested the right to have new diplomatic relations with Israel. And I'd like to know if that's true, if he has any information on that subject. Secondly, relations between Darfour and southern Sudan. We've heard two opinions, two sides. Now, even if Darfur is just a province in Sudan, if the south of Sudan, is it responding to the needs of the people of Darfur? Are there relations between these areas?
Right. I'm not here as representing the government of South Sudan. Officially, I'm not. But as part of that nation, I have dual citizenships, and I'm American as well as Southern Sudanese. I don't know why we will be selective in what country that will have a relationship. We don't see how. Well, if you see passport, the old passport of Sudan. Again, in the south until July 9th will become officially independent. But as we speak, in that passport, it said you go to all other countries except Israel. Whoever that put that, I don't know who did that, but you know who put such statement. We in the South, we actually don't even have any problem with Israel. So why shouldn't we not have a great, not only great relationship, but an excellent relationship with the state of Israel? So there's no reason why I think myself, as a Sudanese before, not Southern Sudanese, I think I was prevented to go to Israel. Maybe now, maybe Israel would be the first country that I would go and see and visit. So there's no reason we should not have that diplomatic relation with Israel. So here, as I said before, I'm not representing the government of South Sudan, but as a member, as a citizen, I will be the first to advocate that relationship. In regard to our relationship, the Southern Sudanese with the Darfur, yes, there is no problem. And actually, what had happened many years ago, we just want to forget it, the people in the South. And let me maybe highlight a little bit by what I'm talking about many years ago. In many years ago, between the North and South, the war that had been going on. So there was a, alliance between the people in Darfur and the North, because they are Muslims. So they were kind of all together fighting the Southerners under the umbrella of saying, well, these are Christians. Well, in the South right now, we are not even talking about what had happened in many years ago. It happened because the people in Darfur were brainwashed by the North. And so there's no reason they all of them regret why they have been fighting or killing people in the South. And so we're not only forgetting what they have done before, but we are actively helping them. Even in the United States, I am a part of Save Darfur. And that's what it's supposed to be. By the way, they did not decide to come to South Sudan and exterminate or kill people in the South. I'm talking about the people in Darfur. And so, honestly, we are brothers. We are sisters. Brothers and sisters, and so there's no problem. We can help them even in my own village, very remote. We have 3 Darfurians, people from Darfur. They're there. They're operating. They are selling their stuff. Nobody disturbing them. We even consider as our brothers. They are supposed to have their passport, or if they want, they could have their citizenship in this house. So we suffer the same situation, being mistreated by the same enemy, and so we should be one.
Merci, thank you, John. Y aurait-il une autre question?
Are there any other questions? Yes. Sir? After the lady. Could you raise your questions and introduce yourself, please?
My name is Abu Zar. I'm representing Global Network for Rights and Development, Sudan office. First, I would like to congratulate my brother John by eventually now newborn country in Africa, South Sudan. And to be fair, when we are talking about human rights situation in Sudan, we know that there are many violations in South and West, and even in some West. But everyone, I think, now they are knowing that there are many innocent people from minorities have been killed in south of Sudan by SPLA, the official army of South Sudan government. And I think a big role of human rights defenders must be raised now by strengthening the roles of international humanitarian law and human rights law, and that by raising the awareness and monitoring violations against minorities. And many people now, if you assume that there are Jeune in Darfour, many people now talking about the Dinka in South are playing same role by killing the minorities from another people in south of Sudan. So we're asking the international community to, all of us must support all the steps of maintaining the peace in Sudan, in south or north or west or east. And you must put pressure on the government of South of Sudan to do its part in maintaining the national rights of the people of South of Sudan and provide all violators of human rights to fair trials compatible with the human dignity. Thank you.
Merci pour votre question.
Thank you for your question. I see that Bernal was agreeing with you when you raised your question, so I will give you the floor, Bernal, to comment on what this gentleman has just said, and then we will give the floor to John. Rapidly. In fact, this question is extremely important. We can be very happy here that Southern Sudan, after so many decades of horror and suffering and massacres, is adhering to independence. You know that human nature is very strange, and over this decade of combat and suffering, fighting against the North, the horrors that the Southern Sudanese were accompanied as well by a number of horrors that the Southern Sudanese troops committed, where there were warlords and divisions. And ethically speaking, with our current demands for international justice, a great deal can be said about the way the Southern fighters fought against the North. And the fractions carried out a lot of killing as well. Now I'm saying this because now we cannot be complacent about the independence of the South and say, woof, great, sigh of relief. This country was destroyed. It was never wealthy. And of course, after all these years and these decades of war, it was martyrized, it was pounded, and it became even poorer. And this situation will need solidarity by the international community, a strong response. They will be needing money. We'll have to see how the minorities, because there are many minorities in the South, how we have to take a look at how they're being treated. And we'll have to see how power is being distributed. And Jean, who died right after the signing the peace agreements in a helicopter accident. He had a global vision for Sudan. And the current leaders of the South are looking at the South and saying, well, we should separate from the North because they persecuted us. But we have a small country here facing enormous problems, and leaders who were raised during decades of war. And that's not the best school to learn about democracy. So we will all have to be very watchful. And we can't say, well, we'll accept that because they've been through very hard times. We have to be careful about human rights, because if we let one thing go, then things will follow suit. Jean Dao spoke to us about this. The people in Darfur served in the Sudanese army for a long time, and they were part of the troops that massacred people. So we should consider that the people in Darfur were Muslim, and okay, so they were killing Christians. Well, that was logical. Then going into the army was the only way that people could manage economically. Even officers in the army came at times from Darfur, and they were able to rise through the ranks. And that's why there were these kinds of massacres. These were all contributing factors. There are people who think that we should turn the page. And in Darfur, in the south of Sudan, we all have common objectives concerning the Khartoum government. And I think we have to talk about this and show solidarity, but we have to take a close look at what's going on. And I'd like to conclude by making one comment. This will come out in the future. The government of Khartoum always uses ways to wriggle out of situations. We talk about the Lord's Residence Army, which was made up of Christian fanatics that came out of Uganda, and over the years they became crazy men, madmen. Nobody understands their ideology, and they kill and they loot everywhere in the region, and they have incursions in the south. And this was the question that Jandel was asking: who is arming them? Who is financing them? How is it that they're allowed to have these incursions and abduct people? And what is the responsibility of the Khartoum government? Everybody thinks that they are being financed by Khartoum. And this is one of the weapons, one of the arms that Khartoum is using to destabilize their enemies in Darfur and in the south. Just a comment. While we're talking about the arrest warrant, the international, the ICC has signed a warrant about Era to go to the south, where from the Democratic Republic of Congo, where there was a great deal of violence, and now we have information that are well-founded, tell us about incursions into Darfur through Central Africa Republic, which began months before the referendum as a means of intimidation, as a warning to say, we're here, don't follow what's going on in the south of Sudan. So we see that ties are being created, and there is where we see that some of these groups have benefited from impunity, and that we have to address this in a global way. And this explains the rise in sexual violence, for example, in the area.
Well, in regard to your question, Abu Zaram, yes, if there is, I would not would have denied to explain if there is any problem or if there is any mass killing in the southern part of Sudan committed by the SPLA, as you said. If there is any, I'm not aware of that. You were talking about the Dinka and the SPLA is killing minorities. I don't know. Look, I just came back from Sudan 2 weeks ago, and there was no killing of any minorities going on in southern Sudan right now. If you have any information, let me know. The only thing I heard that going on in southern Sudan is now that there has been a frequent raiding. A village go to another village and raid, take cows away from them. Even if they are all Dinka, okay, on the same tribe, they go to another village and take some other people's cows. That's the failure of a government there. I agree with you. It would be something that the government of Southern Sudan must address. Whether you are killing other tribe or what, for a reason of taking cows or goats away from them, is not acceptable. And that's why somebody like me is against it. We say, you government, do more. But there is nothing called a genocide there going on in South Sudan. There is no mistreatment of some minorities tribe in southern Sudan. Nothing. Actually in Southern Sudan we have 67 tribes, and all the 67 tribes are represented in the government. We are not, big tribe is not against the other small tribe. So there is nothing, brother, that has to be compared with what the North have done in southern Sudan. I remember in my own village, they did a campaign of killing parents before you took girls. For example, if they want to abduct a girl, they kill mother and father so that a girl cannot escape to anybody. They know their mothers and fathers or some relative have been killed. So that's what was actually going on. When I was 12 years old, what do I do with revelation in this house or being a Christian against Muslim? There's nothing I knew at that time. But young people like me, some of them, my cousins and my relatives and some friends were killed for really no reason why we were killed. So why should it, and here's what I want to make sure you understand very well. I'm talking about the government in the North. I'm not generalizing the people in the North. When I talk about North, I mean the government. This successive government have done so destruction to our country, to Sudan, whether in the North or somewhere else in the western part of our country, which is Darfour, or eastern part, or southern Sudan. This government that have been controlled by few fanatics, just few guys that have been running the country ever since, are the one that have been doing this. And what they do is they hire people like Jeune, give them money, give them weapon, and go and do my dirty work. That's what they have been doing. It's not the majority of people in the North. Actually, some of them are very good people than others who can think. So I'm not talking about the Northerners, everybody. I'm talking about the government. If you defend this government, it's a government that have been, actually, they caused this, split in our country. So why can't they learn to just live in peace with people? When you live in peace, you get more than when you are killing others. So there is nothing that has been going on in southern Sudan right now, according to what I have learned, and I have been there. I go there every year. So there is no killing at all. Whoever is telling you that is completely a pure lie.
Thank you, John. Merci beaucoup pour cette intervention.
Thank you. We have come to the end of the time allotted to us, and we will be continuing, and in order for us to have time to do so, we're going to have to stop. But if any of you would like to ask our panelists questions, you may do that when we go down from the podium. because our three speakers, Mr. John Down, Bernard Schalscha, and Juan Branco, will be here in the room, and you can ask them questions afterwards. I'd like to thank our three panelists for sharing their experiences with us and for giving us a picture of the situation in Sudan. This is a topic that is very much in the news, and we should follow events. By the summer, southern Sudan should become independent, and we will see what will happen with Abyei, the province of Abyei, where a referendum is planned as well. I thank you for your kind attention.